I've trained to be a teacher, I've trained to be a trainer, I've been the trainer. Just because you do the training course doesn't mean you'll be a good trainer. It's a bit like you in photography. Just because you've got a camera, I think there's passion. So ever since I've been in education and training, I'm always wanting to be better and learn more and work harder at delivering training in a way that's really engaging and sustaining. I think somebody once says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's a feeling that I care about my learners and their well-being, and I'll be there to support them on the learning journey. Yeah. If you're interested, follow that thought. Explore further. Trust yourself. Trust the decisions you want to make, and trust TrainSmart. TrainSmart have really got their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry. So they're always in dialogue, whether it's at the local level or the federal level, so they really know what's going on. So that information is really important for students. Yeah, because it's quite, because to get full accreditation with the Australian Counselling Association is a huge commitment of time and study. But just having one foot in the door at a lower level, at least you're in the association. I think somebody once said that the 21st century is the learning century, the century of the brain. We know so much more about the brain today than we did 50 years ago. So capturing that knowledge, because if we can understand how the brain works, we can really enhance learning, and learning can be accelerated and retained. But I think also my own personal goal at the moment, particularly in the current climate, is to use more online technologies like Zoom to not just transfer knowledge, but to create powerful learning experiences in a virtual environment. So yesterday, doing a practical assessment with students, they had to demonstrate, through a role play or an interview with myself, how they manage their stress. And generally I'd say the average age was 25 and upwards, and I was just really blown away by a series of interactions with these learners yesterday when they're talking about, I'll do meditation, I pray, I have my faith. And I thought, wow, this is, and I was saying it to my partner when I went home, it's great that these things are now, if you like, commonplace. I'm not undermining it by saying commonplace, but it's part of our everyday conversation. We can talk about those things. And I was just really humbled and gratified and moved that young people particularly are taking on board the conversation and the strategies that go with it to really help themselves, and that level of awareness. I think, like you were saying earlier, Aaron, the stigma in some ways is fast disappearing. And it was just an open conversation. Because I think you're right, I think a lot of people seem to think it's a bit more of a compartmentalized. Yeah, I really like that question. Because in fact, I was talking to one learner yesterday who was sharing with me that they want to create their own program for giving young women between the ages of 15 and 25 self-love. It's a series of programs. So there's a great example of somebody coming to a diploma in counselling and using those skills to set up possibly their own business. But when people talk about entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs don't. If you look at the psychology of great entrepreneurs, money was not the driving force. The driving force was, I've got something I want to share with the world, and it might make if it makes money, it makes money. But you know what I'm saying? It's not the driving force. But as people, I think what do entrepreneurs do? They just see a gap in the market. So the market needs this, I'm going to do that. And I think it gives them satisfaction. It gives them empowerment. They're in control of their destiny. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. I think there is a huge market for it, especially in the current climate. Like we said earlier, mental health is an open topic. Governments, both nationally and locally, are promoting it. So I think there'll be a lot of buy-in for people who've got the right, entrepreneurial mindset. Yes, it's updating material, but I think what it is also adapting material to your learners. Yeah, and I guess that's the trainer that I'm not. I won't just take the course material, lock, stock and barrel, and say, okay, I'll look at it and interact with it, dissect it, think about how can I, if you like, manipulate this material so it really, really sits in the world of these learners today. Because next week's learners might be a bit different. It's amazing how mindfulness now is so much part of, everyday conversation, workplaces, community groups. We can all be encouraged to embrace mindfulness. And what I was saying to our learners the other day was what I love about the mindfulness approach is that, okay, on one side it might have its roots in some sort of Eastern philosophies like Buddhism. But what the pioneers have done is, like my clinical psychologist, clinically trained, but they're combining the best of, clinical cognitive behavior therapy or mindfulness-based stress management with powerful concepts maybe that are ingrained in Buddhist psychology. What I like about it is that for me it's got this scientific proven base. Underlying all our vocational education training courses are some basic workplace skills, some basic employability skills, and they problem solving, teamwork, communication. So if you like, they're all embedded in the course. So when students come into a class and they're interacting and doing group work, yes, group work is good for learning, but they're also learning. When you go to work today, you rarely solve a problem by yourself. A team approach. Why do you think we have on our desktops Microsoft Teams? So we work in teams. I think there's two things there, and one is I think they're learning to learn, and that's a really, really powerful skill. So if they can learn to learn, they can take that learning to learn ability to any place. And I think employers today are looking for employees who can learn, because the new workplace is a learning organization. They say you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I can present information, and what I love about training, if you like, is the creative process whereby I think, how can I really make this learning accessible to the learner? How can I make it engaging? And how can I make it stick? Sometimes I say to my learners at the end of the day, my job is, at the end of the day, is to visualize you covered in sticky notes. So that's because my job is to make the learning stick. So what techniques and strategies can I use that you walk out of that door having learned something and that's of real value to you? I was really excited to join an organization that really promoted these courses in, mental health and, counseling and community service. I think it's a really great space to be in, and to also know that, the government is promoting this kind of learning to really, really enhance our society as we move forward. Well, I've been in education all my working life, whether it's been, high school English teacher here in Australia, or teaching English to Japanese students in Japan, to working, even in the high school setting as an English teacher. I was a head of year, so a lot of responsibility for the well-being, particularly, emotional well-being of all students. And that is, I think, has been the thread as a classroom teacher. That's I think that's what I bring to my learners. It's a sense of worth, elevate their self-esteem, and provide them a sense of belonging. Well, like I said, from being an early teenager, I wanted to be a teacher. I was a youth leader, with the Scouts and things like that. So it's something that was always in me. And then went into teaching. But when I was a teacher, I always wanted to be like a seminar presenter or something like that. I go to seminars, I'd be thinking, I can do this, and I did it. Yeah. In fact, so in terms of being entrepreneurial, so in 2008, I quit my job at my permanent position with the education department because there was something in me I wanted to do more with my life than teach in a school classroom. And I made it happen. I got into adult learning and adult training, and 12 years later, here I am telling my story. Yeah.